I'm 28 years old and I've already accepted that I'll probably never own a home and that I'll never retire and that I'll be working until I die. The crazy thing about all of this is, though, is that I'm one of the lucky ones, technically speaking. Like, I have a degree and a decent job, all the stuff, right? But I need you to understand something. This living situation that we're all in isn't normal. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And it also doesn't have to be this way either. Now, before you say it, it's not because I'm buying too much avocado toast or whatever food item is a new trendy thing nowadays. Something broke. And I want to talk about what that was because the answer isn't what most people are really talking about nowadays. Now, here's what we've been told. And if you grew up as a Gen Z person, then you kind of hear the same thing that I was hearing growing up too, and still to this day. We've been told that the problem is immigrants are taking our jobs, housing, social security benefits, education. If it's not immigrants, then it's just lazy people on welfare, tanking the economy and our job prospects. If it's not lazy people and immigrants, then it's probably DI hiring. If it's not DI hiring, lazy people on welfare, or immigrants, then it's these boomers who hold on to the positions way too long as managers and they never retire, so no one can ever go to the top and increase their salary, increase responsibilities, etc., because they just won't retire. If it's not boomers, DI, lazy people, or immigrants, then throw like a rock somewhere in there and you might hit someone that might say, oh, it's feminism somehow, some way, basically. The gist I'm trying to get to you is that everyone's pointing fingers at each other, at other working people who are struggling just as much as you are. But here's the thing though, while we're all fighting over the crumbs, somebody walked away with the whole cake. And here's what's scary about all that stuff. We are the last generation that will remember when this was different. My grandfather remembers getting hired at a factory with full benefits on day one. I remember when gig work didn't really exist. But kids growing up right now, this is all they know. And if we don't fight back, this isn't just going to be a temporary crisis. This is just potentially just a new normal forever. That's not me trying to fearmonger you, but it's like something that like at our age growing up, we just got to recognize that like at this point we are at that stage in life where our voices do matter and that our perspectives matter as well. And it should be taken seriously. And you may not know, you may feel these things, but you don't know what to really, you don't know how to like process it or think about it or what to do next. And that's what I'm trying to tackle here. So let's talk about it. And this is not going to be some like political lectures. I'm not trying to do all that, man. I'm just trying to figure out for us as people, like why life feels so much harder than it should be. My grandfather's generation and really my parents' generation to some extent lived under what people called back then the post-war social contract. And I'm not trying to be in my Jaden Smith bag about all this, but just there back then there was understanding. If you worked hard, you could have a decent life. Not rich, not luxury, but just decent, comfortable. Right? That was the word that my people used, the comfortable. And now let me break that down, like what that actually meant. In the 1950s, 1 in 3 workers was in a union. These unions negotiated for everybody, even non union workers, because companies had to compete for workers. So your grandfather could walk into a factory and get hired with benefits on day one. There was none of this independent contractor bullcrap. There was no, oh, we'll get right back to you. It was just a job with health insurance, paid vacation, a path to retirement, like a pension, like the typical stuff back then. And then my mother went to a university in the late 1970s, man. She paid for her entire tuition working a part time job. There wasn't like, no, oh, she helped pay for it. Nah, she paid for all of it. Try doing that now. Today, I think the average student loan debt is over $42,000. And that's just the average. There's plenty of people out here walking out with 50K, 80K. You might be one of those people who have over $100,000 in debt before you even started your first job. In the 1970s, the median home price was like $23,000. Now, mind you, that's the home price back then too. $23,000. The household income during that same time period was $9,000. But today, the median home price is over 400K. Take the median household income now, and it's $75,000 as a household income, meaning that two partners, potentially a child as well. So now a house costs more than 5 times your annual income. And that's if you can even save for a down payment while paying rent that eats half your paycheck. And your grandparents retired with pensions. That's guaranteed income for life. My grandfather worked 30 years and got a check every month until he died. Now, we got 401ks, which is just a fancy way of saying figure it out yourself and hope the stock market doesn't crash the year that you retire. Now, look, if we're going to keep it a stack, be honest with each other, I got to pause right here and be real to you guys. These benefits, even though I know people don't want to hear this type of stuff, but it's important to the overall point I'm trying to get at you. These benefits I've been talking about weren't distributed equally. Black and brown families were systemically excluded from homeownership through a concept called redlining. Now, real quick, if you don't know what redlining is, it's this illegal practice that people will say, or argue at least, that it still is functioning today. If you haven't heard of redlining, the long story short of it is that it's a concept where financial services like banks, insurance companies, pretty much anywhere you deal with money, they used an argument that because of where you lived, which was for black and brown people, black and brown areas, banks and insurance companies would say, oh, that's a dangerous area. Oh, that's a hazardous area. We don't want to lend you money to buy a house in this area because of blase, blase, blase. But when it came to like Caucasian areas, banks and insurance companies and other financial services had no problem giving them aid and help because racism. Even back then, women couldn't even get credit cards without their husband's permission until the 1970s. And immigrant communities and other minority communities, they also faced massive discrimination, right? This was a whole thing. But here's the key that I'm trying to get you to focus on. I want you to understand this key point I'm trying to make here. The structure was more appealing back then for the American dream. When black workers and other minority workers fought for access to these systems, they were fighting to get into something that actually worked. Today, we're all fighting over access to systems that are broken for almost everybody. The point isn't that the good old days were perfect. That's not what I'm trying to say, and also they weren't. The point is that working people across the board had more power, more security, and more of a shot at stability than we do now. And this didn't just happen by accident, right? Our grandparents' generation fought for this stuff. They went on strike. They organized. They demanded better. That 8-hour workday that you have now, people died fighting for that. The weekends that you have right now, people died fighting for that. They didn't accept scraps. So why are we accepting it? So what happened, right? How do we go from work hard and you'll be okay to work maybe 2, 3 jobs and maybe you can afford rent with a roommate? It didn't happen overnight. It was deliberate. It happened over decades. And this isn't a Republican or Democrat thing either. This is a class thing. I'm trying to tell you guys something. In the 1980s, we saw a massive shift. Ronald Reagan came in talking about trickle-down economics. If you don't know what that is, it's the idea that if we cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations, the CEOs would invest that money into its workers and it'll trickle down to everyone else. Spoiler alert, it didn't trickle down. Reagan also went after unions hard at this time period. In 1981, he fired over 11,000 air traffic controllers, the ones who you see outside. If you're on a plane going somewhere and you look outside the window and you see those people waving around some light figure, yeah, that's an air traffic controller. Those people went on strike, and Ronald Reagan fired them, banned them from federal service for life. That sent a message to every corporation in America. You can break unions now, and the government will back you up. Union membership collapsed. And then when unions collapse, so did workers' bargaining power. Starting in the 1980s and going straight through the 90s and 2000s, America removed company restrictions for everything. Banking, communication, energy, housing, airlines. The argument was always the same by the government and these corporations. Let the free market work itself out and everyone benefits from it, right? Let the companies do what they want, man. Eventually, you all will level up. But here's what actually happened though: banks got bigger and they got riskier until they crashed the economy back in 2008. We all remember that time period, right? Corporations were merging until a handful of companies controlled entire industries. And now, with less competition, they could pay workers less, charge people like you more, and pocket the profit. Y'all remember Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton signed this thing called NAFTA. To keep it short, NAFTA was a deal between the US, Canada, and Mexico that let each other buy and sell stuff to each other without extra fees. That makes trading easier. This sent manufacturing jobs overseas. Then, former President Obama bailed out the banks in 2008 because the logic was the banks and essentially all financial services like insurance companies, etc. The logic was that them failing will be catastrophic to the American economy, even though millions of Americans didn't get the same type of relief and lost their homes. I'm not here trying to tell you whether what Obama did was good or bad. That's not what we're here for. But I'm here to tell you that both parties take corporate money. Both parties pass corporate friendly policies. The differences are real on some issues, but on this core economic question of who has power, workers or corporations, both sides have been pretty clear about their answer since the 1970s, which was 40 years ago. Now, I know this is a lot, but stay with me because this next part is where this all connects, all right? The result of all of these policies, you know what? Let me just show you the numbers here. From 1979 to 2020, worker productivity increased by 62%. That means we're working harder and producing more than ever. In that same period, hourly pay increased by just 17% when you adjust for inflation. Now, think about what I'm actually telling you. You're working harder than your parents did. You're producing more value to the economy than they did, but you're taking home way less of it. Now, where did it go, right? It didn't go to the workers. It went straight to the top. And that's not an accident, that's just by design. Meanwhile, the CEO pay increased by 1,000%. And no, that's not a typo. 1,000%. In 1965, this average CEO was making about like 20 times what the average worker was making, which is still crazy to me, but back then it was 20 times the average worker. Now today, it's over 350 times. And then came the final innovation in screwing over the working class. You just don't call them workers now. Uber, DoorDash, Instacart, Lyft, they call everyone independent contractors, man. You know what that means? That means no benefits, no overtime, no job security, no unemployment insurance if you let go. You get all the risk and none of the protection. And it's spreading beyond gig apps now. Companies in every industry saw this and thought, hey, we can do that too, right? So now we got contract workers everywhere. Everybody's on their own. Healthcare is tied to employment, which is insane. You mean tell me you lose your job, you lose your health insurance? You want to start a business? Better hope you don't get sick. And then even with insurance, one medical emergency can bankrupt you. Now, states are cutting funding to public universities, so schools are now raising their tuition. The federal government offers loans instead of grants. And now we have $1.8 trillion in student loan debt, and people in their 40s are still paying off their bachelor's degrees. This is the world that we inherited, not created, and it's accelerating. There's tax cuts for corporations, the labor protections are now gutted, the Supreme Court is siding with bosses over workers again and again, making it harder for you to sue your employer, and it's easier to force you into employment dispute where you can't even win. And every administration keeps pushing the same direction. More power to corporations, less power to the workers. The speed changes, but the direction doesn't. So here's where it gets really harmful for you. Because when people are suffering and they're struggling, they start asking questions. They get angry. And that anger is completely justified. But then someone has to answer the question, why is life so hard? And the answer we keep getting fed is, it's those people over there. Immigrants are taking your jobs. Minorities are getting positions they aren't qualified for. Poor people are lazy and still get rewarded. Look, I hear your frustration. I get it. I'm hearing you. But think about who actually benefits from that situation. That immigration worker isn't your enemy. They're also being exploited even worse than you are. They're getting paid poverty wages, working in dangerous conditions with zero legal protections because they're afraid to speak up and cause attention, even if they're here legally. The person screwing you both is the boss who hires undocumented workers under the table for $8 an hour. The CEOs are undercutting your wages by exploiting someone even more vulnerable. When workers, regardless of where they're from or their documentation status, organize together and demand fair wages, everyone's wages go up. When we fight each other instead, only the boss wins. Let me just show you the numbers, man. The wealth of American billionaires increased by $2.1 trillion during the COVID pandemic alone. CEO compensation is up over 1,000 since the late 1970s. Corporate profits are at a record high, man. But sure, the reason you can't afford rent or struggling to find a job, etc., is because your company hired a minority person in human resources. Here's how I think about it. Even if every single executive position in America went to the most diverse candidate possible, and even if that somehow disadvantaged you specifically, it wouldn't come close to offsetting the trillions of dollars that have been strategically transferred from workers to owners over the past 40 years. I understand that there's people out there that feel the diversity conversation is important, but it's a fight over scraps. The people at the top love that we're fighting about it. Because while we're arguing over who gets hired, we're not talking about why wages are so low in the first place. We gave billions in tax breaks to Amazon. Apple stashes money overseas to avoid taxes, allegedly. While we're focused on believing personal welfare is the problem, the ones who actually get the bailouts, the forgiveness, the aid, and welfare are the corporations. But we've been trained to punch down or sideways instead of up. Boomers won't retire. Millennials are entitled. Gen Z is lazy. We're fighting each other across generational lines, man. Meanwhile, wealth inequality exists within every generation. There are broke boomers and rich Gen Z kids. It's not about age, man, it's about class. I saw this play out in my last job. Management kept us understaffed, so while we were all overworked and pissed off, I watched people blame the new hire who wasn't pulling their weights instead of just asking why we didn't have enough staff in the first place. And I did it too. I was frustrated with this guy for weeks before I realized that our anger was real and justified, but it was pointed at exactly the wrong target. And that's what I mean by misdirection. The working people are finding each other, they're not organizing together. Divided workers don't strike. Divided workers don't unionize. Divided workers don't demand better. And that's exactly what the people at the top want. And I get it. It's easier to be mad at someone you can see. The immigrant coworker, the person on food stamps, the diversity hire. But the CEO lives in a different world, man. The hedge fund manager never crosses your path. The politicians are on TV lying to your face. They're abstract to you. They're distant. You don't see them in your daily lives or on your social media algorithm. Just videos about the next working class demographic that's causing you trouble. But they are the ones making the decisions that actually affect your life, not all these other people. And you know what really upsets me the most? Is that it's working, man. They've got us so busy fighting each other that we can't even imagine fighting them. We are so convinced that we are powerless that we don't even try. But the thing is that we're not powerless. We've never been powerless. They just need us to think that we are. If you're still with me, I appreciate you sticking around for so long because this is where we get to what we can actually do about this. Where does that leave us, right? Gen Z is inheriting the climax of 40 plus years of these policies still going. We're the first generation in American history expected to be worse off than our parents, Not because we're lazy, not because we're not trying, but because the game is rigged. We're graduating with massive debt into an economy where entry level jobs require 5 years of experience. We're paying rent that eats half our income. Like I said before, we're one medical emergency away from bankruptcy, even with insurance. We're working gig economies with no security, no benefits, no future. We're told to save for retirement while we can barely save for next month's rent. And we're watching this happen in real time. We can see the wealth accumulation. We can see the stock buybacks. We don't know what it means. It just means the company's buying back their stock. That's all it really means. We can see the luxury bunkers that billionaires are building for the apocalypse that they are creating. And we're the last generation that will remember it was different. If we don't change course now, this becomes permanent. This becomes normalized. Your kids will be growing up thinking this is just how life is. They won't even remember that it used to be different. The window to fight back is right now. And here's what I want you to see. Your coworker is not your enemy. The person working next to you, whether they're documented or not, whether they're a different race or gender, whether they're older or younger, they're not the problem. They're all in the same boat. Your enemy is the system that pits you against each other. Your enemy is the boss who pays you both as little as possible while taking home a bonus bigger than your annual salary. Your enemy is the politician who takes corporate money and then votes against raising the minimum wage. Your enemy is the landlord raising your rent every year just because they can. This is about class. It's always been about class. And the sooner we figure that out, the sooner we can actually do something about it. So, what does fighting back look like? Let me tell you about my friend Sammy, all right? He works at a popular spot in our city. I'm not going to say where. About a year ago, he started talking to his coworkers about their wages, just casual conversation, right? He was like saying stuff like, hey, how much do you make? Is that fair for what we do here? That's literally just how it started. And people were nervous at first because we're all trained not to talk about money. But here's the thing, it's legally protected. Your boss can't fire you for discussing wages with coworkers. That's just federal law. Within about like 6 or 7 months, him and his coworkers unionized their store. Then two more stores nearby joined them. And now they're negotiating for better pay, better benefits, and actual scheduling that doesn't jerk them around every week. And he didn't have to do special training. He's not some professional organizer. He's just a dude who was tired of being broke and decided to do something about it. And that's what this looks like on the ground. It's not abstract. It's not something that you can't do or people around you can't do. It's just people talking to each other and realizing they have power when they stick together. Here's another thing to bring it all home. I didn't know crap about tenant organizing until my building tried to raise my rent by 30% a few years back. I was furious, but and I also felt helpless too at the same time. Then I did some research. I found a local tenant union online. You literally just got to Google tenant union and then my city name. I went to one meeting and they had like these templates for everything: how to talk to neighbors, how to request repairs, how to organize a rent strike if it comes to that, how to fight unjust evictions. 3 months later, we had organized half the building. We negotiated the rent increase down to 8% instead of 30. We got the landlord to actually fix the stuff that had been broken for years. And now the tenants have a structure in place for the next time the landlord tries something. These resources exist. You just have to look. And then once you start looking, you realize you're not alone. Now, here's what we need policy wise: we need stronger labor protections. Gotta make it easier to form unions. We need to classify gig workers as employees. We need real consequences for wage theft. We need to break the link between employment and healthcare. I don't care if you say you want Medicare for all, public option, whatever. I don't care. Just something where you don't lose your insurance because you lost your job. We need a housing policy that treats housing as a human need, not just an investment vehicle. Build more, regulate these corporate landlords, make it illegal for investment firms to buy up entire neighborhoods. We need to make public college affordable again like it was for previous generations. And we need to address the student loan debt that's already crushing millions of people. We need the wealthy and the corporations to actually pay taxes. Billionaires shouldn't pay lower tax rates than teachers and grocery store cashiers. We need to raise the minimum wage and tie it to inflation. If it had kept up with productivity that I told you before, that our productivity increased by 62% since the 19, what was it, 70s, I believe. If we followed that metric, it would be over $20 an hour right now for a minimum wage. These aren't radical ideas, man. These are things that other developed countries already do. These are things America used to do better. But here's what you can do today. All right? Talk to your coworkers about wages, and I know it's uncomfortable. Do it anyway if you can. It's legally protected, and it's the first step to everything else. Communication. We keep talking about how life is unfair and this sucks and how could people deal with this and oh, this is so frustrating. Okay, are you communicating though? Who are you talking to? If you don't want to talk to your coworkers, are you talking to your representative in Congress? Let them know, hey, I don't like what's going on over here. What are you doing? If there's a union in your industry, look into joining. If there's not, look into forming one. Just Google how to start a union in this industry. And it's nerve wracking. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here telling you, oh, it's super like easy and no stress at all about it. No, it's your first time doing all this stuff, man. It's gonna be stressed out. You're gonna have a lot of questions, be confused, and guess what? You are uh, tech savvy enough to pop onto Google and YouTube, and I promise you, any question that you have in your head, somebody else had that question way before you, man. Show up to city council meetings when they're voting on housing policy or tenant protections. Those local decisions affect your life directly. Yes, the president is involved because he's a federal, but what matters is your mayor and your city council because they're the ones who actually control the funding that a lot of things get in your area. Those decisions affect you, and most people don't show up for them, which means your voice would actually matter if you went there. Also, support strikes, even when they're inconvenient for you. When workers are striking, they're fighting for standards that help all of us. And I want you to vote, but don't just stop there. Vote for people who don't take corporate money if you can, but then hold them accountable. Call their offices, show up at town homes, make them uncomfortable if they break their promise to you. Build mutual aid networks in your community. You guys share some resources, help each other out when the system fails us. Back then, back in the day, I don't know if you guys remember, but back then, people used to have neighbors that would come over and bring like sugar or salt or whatever. That's what I mean by like a community of network. I'm not telling you that you gotta be like a spokesperson or be like a leader or nothing like that, but I'm saying like, yo, your neighbor. All the times you walk out the door and you see your neighbor and you guys might do that little wave to each other because you gotta kind of wave because you both locked eyes to each other. Do a little deeper than that. Just start a little, just like, start a little convo. It doesn't even need to be about like tenants or union or nothing like that, but just start a convo, just to build rapport. It gets easier after a while, man. Most importantly, I want you to stop fighting other working people. When you feel that anger at immigrants or people on welfare or whoever, just pause and ask yourself who actually benefits when you're mad at them instead of mad at your boss. And look, maybe you voted for Trump hoping that he would drain the swamp or bring back jobs. And I get it. He talked about some of this stuff on his campaign trail. But we have to look at what actually happened with the policy. These tax cuts are overwhelmingly going to the rich and these corporations like Walmart, Verizon, Disney, Facebook. There was no real change to the fundamental power dynamics that we have here. You can support someone and still hold them accountable for their actual record. That's not betrayal. That's being honest. If the next person that you vote for doesn't deliver either, then you hold them accountable too. Neither party is going to save us unless we force them to. They are our representatives. They vote based on what we say we want. That's how it's supposed to work. The point isn't about who you voted for. The point is, are the policies actually helping you, or are they helping the people at the top? And I get it. This is completely overwhelming, and the problems are huge. The system is deeply entrenched, and sometimes it feels like nothing that we do will matter. But here's what keeps me going. Every right that we have, every protection, every benefit, someone fought for it. The 40-hour work week, overtime pay, child labor laws, Social Security, Medicare, civil rights, women's rights. None of it was given freely. LGBTQ rights. None of it was given freely. All of it was fought for by regular people who decided that they had enough. We're told we're asking for too much, but our grandparents fought for and won more than what we're asking for now. They had more economic security, more worker power, more of a shot at stability. And they didn't have the internet to organize with. They didn't have the tools that we have. So no, we're not asking for too much. We're asking for less than they had. And we're accepting less than what they would have accepted. Our grandparents demanded better and got it. Our parents accepted less, and we've been accepting even less than that. So every time someone quits a crappy job, every time someone talks about their wages, every time someone says, no, I'm worth more than this, that's a crack in the system. Your struggle is real. Your frustration is valid. But it's not because of the person working next to you. It's because for 40 years, policy has been designed to concentrate wealth and power at the top and is working exactly as intended. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We can keep fighting each other while they laugh all the way to the bank, or we can figure out who our actual enemies are and start organizing. This is our economic experience. This is the world Gen Z is inheriting. And we don't fight back now, this becomes permanent. And I don't know about you, but I'm not okay with that. Let me know what you think down in the comments, man. Share your experiences, especially if you organized at work or in your building before. Tell me if you think I'm wrong about something. I do want to hear it, genuinely speaking. And if this made sense to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because the first step to changing things is understanding what's actually happening. The second step is realizing that we're not alone. And the third step is doing something about it together. Thanks for watching.
This is the oppressed, this is the oppressor, this is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fight amongst each other. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy and that everybody else that's black and that wears a lot of hair on his head and hair on his face, they want to keep you thinking that he's your enemy. Why? Because if ever you would throw away that question of racism and started to dealing with a little logic, there would be no one else you could attack other than Henry Hand and other than Tricky Dicky Nixon